Volodymyr Zelenskyy comes away from yesterday's meeting with President Trump with no definitive answer on whether the U.S. will give Ukraine Tomahawk missiles. That's according to a report in Axios. For analysis, let's bring in the Foundation for Defense of Democracy's founder, Cliff May, and former Obama campaign foreign policy advisor, David Tafuri. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Cliff, those comments from Zelenskyy, it doesn't seem like he's going to get the Tomahawk missiles. How much would that have changed the calculation had he gotten them?
Well, I'm still hopeful that he will get them eventually, and it's very important because he needs to hit military targets deep inside Russia, factories where Shahed drones, which are designed by the regime in Tehran, are being manufactured. He needs to be able to stop the resupply of troops inside Ukrainian territory, and the long-range missiles of some sort, Tomahawks, we have others as well, would be very useful for that. But here's what I'm hopeful about, is that when Secretary of State Marco Rubio begins the talks about the upcoming Budapest meeting, he makes it clear, either President Trump comes out of this next set of meetings with a ceasefire, at the very least, or an equalizer is coming. We will give long-range missiles to the Ukrainians, and then, by the way, the Europeans will follow suit because they have long-range missiles too.
David, it seems like every time that strong sanctions are on the table, Tomahawk missiles are on the table, the Russians throw their hands up and say, let's talk. Let's figure this out. Let's talk. Do you have confidence at all that the Russian government will come with serious concessions in the preliminary meetings with Secretary of State Marco Rubio?
No, I don't. Trump has seemed to do another 180 after his call with Putin. And Trump is the commander-in-chief. He has almost sole discretion to determine how we are going to approach the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But this is the biggest conflict in the world. There are millions of lives at stake, and it shouldn't depend on what side of the bed President Trump wakes up on. So now he's going to go forward with a meeting with Putin. He's picked Hungary, which is an odd place for the U.S. to do this meeting because Orban is the one European leader who seems to disseminate Putin disinformation. So why in Hungary? But I would also remind people, if you've been to Ukraine, as I have, you see that the people there are fighting, they're on the edge of survival. They have the slimmest of margins in terms of weapons and ammunition, and they desperately want the United States to help. And if we went forward with the secondary sanctions that Trump has talked about that would target the Russian oil sector, or with providing Tomahawk missiles, that is the type of thing that would put the pressure that's needed on Putin. Without that, I think the Ukrainians have to prepare to fight this war without any support at all for the United States. That would be wise, and just consider anything they do get from the United States as icing on the cake.
Cliff, and you talk about those Tomahawk missiles. Some of the argument against it would be that it would escalate the war even further. Do you think that Russia, if faced with American Tomahawk missiles, would escalate it further towards NATO, towards the United States?
Well, first, it's not an escalation. All you're doing is providing an equalizer. The Russians are using long-range missiles to hit anywhere they want to in Ukraine. And they're not hitting just military targets. This is a terrorist war that Russia is waging. They are hitting nurseries and hospitals. They're trying to cut off electricity and heat in the wintertime. This is dreadful. All you're doing is giving them something equal. And it won't even be equal because, again, the Ukrainians will not use this against the Kremlin. They will not use it against Gorky Park. They will not use it against civilians. We'll say you can't do that. So it's an equalizer so they can better defend themselves from an aggressor. There is a predator and a prey. I understand the president wants to be the mediator. That's a good negotiating tactic. It can work. Why not? But let's understand it. No. And as for, I do not think that Putin wants to say it's an escalation, and then what is he going to do? Well, what he's already done, waging hybrid warfare against NATO allies, drones to Poland, cyber warfare, all of that. Keep in mind, if Putin should succeed in Ukraine, that's not the end of his ambitions. His ambitions are broader, and he is in alignment, not only in alignment with Beijing, Pyongyang, North Korea, and Tehran. All those countries are also helping him in this war against Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting a war not just against Russia, but against North Korea, China, and Tehran as well.
And now, David, turning to the Middle East, Hamas has just announced, by the way, that it's going to return 2 bodies of hostages this evening. We've seen the return of the living hostages. Do you think this is the really marking the end of the conflict here, or are there so many issues still that the two sides have to wade through?
There are so many issues. The ceasefire is very tenuous, and I don't want to take anything away from President Trump and the Trump administration for accomplishing the return of all of the Israeli hostages. That's a really big deal. But in many ways, that was the easiest part of the ceasefire. We always knew eventually the hostages would be returned and there would be a release of Palestinian prisoners. The really difficult issues are, how do you demilitarize Hamas? Are they going to demilitarize? What happens with the remaining Hamas leadership? Will they stay in Gaza? Will they be sent somewhere else, a safe haven in another country, so that they can't interfere in Gaza? We already see in just the last few days that Hamas is killing their opponents inside Gaza, committing violence. And so even the most difficult question that has not been resolved is, who is going to provide security in Gaza after Hamas leaves? President Trump talked about we will retaliate against Hamas if they keep engaging in violence. Sounds like he was suggesting U.S. troops would go there. I know he walked that back, but if he means that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are going to go back into Gaza, once they go back in, the ceasefire is dead.
Can I take this opportunity to disagree and argue with my friend David here? Getting the hostages out was a huge success for Trump, and every other deal that was proposed started with a ceasefire, which means the Israelis would pull back, and then maybe we would get the hostages back. No, Trump saw that in the first phase, early on, 72 hours, you had to get the living hostages out, the 20 of them, and people want the deceased ones as well, those who were murdered. If you understand Israelis, you know this was absolutely vital. It's a small country, but it's kind of a big family. They had to have that happen. That is huge. Now, what happens from here? It's difficult. When Hamas doesn't give up the dead hostages, the ones they've murdered, they're testing to see what they can get away with. They're not going to be disarmed easily. They are shooting their rivals. They're shooting their opponents. They're shooting the dissidents. And where are the kids for the Peace Now people? Where are the ceasefire now? They don't seem to care. Reconstruction is likely to happen on the 53% of Gaza where the Israelis are in control much faster than it will happen in the 47% that Hamas still controls. Getting them to disarm, very challenging ahead. But this is still a big change. And there will be Gazans who will go to the Israeli occupied part of Gaza because it's safer.
Mm-hmm. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, when he was here, said we can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way.
Precisely.
And we'll see which way it's going to be done in the coming weeks and months. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Cliff May, David Tafuri.
Thank you.